Well, you've clicked on the video, which means you're about to see me make a ridged flower pot, and in the beginning, we're going to start wedging. Wedging is the process that ceramicists use to get all the air bubbles out of the clay. This specific type of wedging is called spiral wedging, and I'll use it when I have a large sum of clay, usually about 5 or more pounds. I'll take my hands and pull just a little section of it and fold it in on itself. And after every single fold, I'll rotate the clay about 10 degrees and do it again. This creates a spiral. This piece isn't really held to any criteria, so I just cut off what I think is the right amount for the size of a flower pot, and I'll use this and ram's head wedge it, which does the same thing as the old wedging, just for a smaller amount of clay. The holes on the blue bat and the metal pegs aren't perfect, so I have to dampen this little tan cloth to make sure that the bat doesn't wiggle. You don't want any air to be trapped in between the clay and the bat because it'll mess up the project, so I've shaped the clay into a potato, and sometimes I'll do a ball because the round bottom makes it so that there isn't any air trapped when I stick the clay onto the bat. This is where the start of stability comes in for the rest of the journey. I'll use my elbow and dig it into my waist and use both of my hands to squeeze the clay into the middle while it's spinning. This is part of the centering process. When I dig my elbow into my waist, it prevents the clay from pushing me around. This allows me to maintain stability and get the clay into the center. This process is called coning, and when I squeeze the clay up and bring it back down, it makes it more homogeneous and it gets rid of the air bubbles. Along with these two factors, it makes the clay more centered, which is important to start pulling. I'll finally end the process by pushing all the clay into a puck in the middle. This is where I'm going to start doming and pulling for the actual pot. My new goal is to get all the clay from the center and push it outwards. I'll use my right hand with a sponge and dive deep into the center of the clay, again while maintaining stability, and then I'll pull towards myself to get ready for doming. Before I start doming, I'm going to use my two thumbs to compress the bottom. This just increases the strength of the clay and reduces the chances of it cracking in the kiln. I can finally start doming it, and doming just takes this donut shape and puts it into a cylinder so that when I start pulling, it doesn't rip off. After the doming, I'm going to start pulling, and with pulling, I'm going to use my left hand and dig a little notch into the bottom of the clay. Using this notch and my right hand on the inside, I'll pull up, thus squeezing the clay inwards and forcing it to go up. Ideally, you want to pull the clay in about 2 to 3 tries. The longer you take, the weaker the clay gets. Fortunately for me, this is a really small, simple shape, so it's not too big of a concern for me on this project. As you pull, the top can get a little bit wobbly, and it's completely normal, so I'll use this needle tool to trim off the top and make it uniform again. I'll repeat this process of pulling and trimming until I get the desired shape. To finish the shape and get rid of all the mud on the outside of the pot, I'll use this wooden rib tool in my right hand, and then I'll use my left hand to just push the clay into the rib tool, straightening it out. I wanted to make this flower pot a little bit more interesting, so I used this 90-degree angle on that wooden rib tool to cut into the clay and pull up. As you see, I'm also using my left hand to prevent the walls from changing shape. To finish off the pot, I'll use a variety of tools in my hands and the sponge to just clean it up and compress that edge. You want to compress the edge because it reduces the chance of it chipping in the future. Quickly before I use the red kidney to clean it up, I'll use this wooden knife tool to scrape off the bottom skirt of clay just to again clean it up and make it ready for trimming. I let this pot dry for about an hour, and then I flipped it upside down to let it dry for overnight. You want this to be in a state called leather hard, where it's not so hard and dry that when you use the trim it comes off like chalk, and you don't want it to be so wet that it will change shapes as you're trimming. This specific process that you see here is called tap centering. With tap centering, I'll wait for the clay to go around in a circle closer to my hand, and once it's about to approach my hand, I'll tap it into the center. Once the pot is in the center, I'll use these little pieces of clay to push around it to prevent it from falling off as I trim. The first step for my trimming process is just to get the outside clean and smooth, so I'll use the trim tool and bring it slowly into the side of it as it's spinning. If there are any imperfections or when I use that knife tool to cut it, it'll smoothen out as it goes through the tool. I wanted to keep the foot of this pot simple so that the actual flower is the main focus of the piece. The only thing I actually have to do is just reduce the thickness of the bottom. If it's too thick, it'll dry poorly and it can crack. And it also risks pillowing out on the bottom, and the actual pot won't sit level on the table, so I'll just use this trim tool to cut down a little bit. If you made it this far into the video, it means that either I'm doing something right or you're bored and you're letting this video sit in the background. Either one I'll take because YouTube likes to see that people watch all the way through, but I'll assume the first one for this case scenario. Some other things you can do to help me out if you feel as though these videos have brought value to you is subscribe, because it helps me out and it keeps you in the loop for new projects. The other thing I would recommend are my other pottery videos, along with my flying airplane videos and guitar videos. Until next time, see ya.